Hi, everyone. Please continue to eat, but we're going to go ahead and get started up here as we do have to end at 1:45 to let our lovely guests off to their next meeting. I'm Morgan Davis. I'm one of the correspondent governors here at the club. I'm really excited to be talking about Decarbonizing Asia, which, aside from the book that we will be talking about today, is also just in general a very interesting and relevant topic for all of us. I'm sure that all of you have a lot of questions. I know I do. We'll be able to take your questions throughout our conversation today. I think we're a nice small group, so there will be microphones going around. Don't feel like you need to wait until the end for a designated Q&A. If you have a question, just throw your hand up at any point. A mic will come to you, and then I'll just make sure you get your question to the correct person. I'll let each of our panelists tell you a little bit about themselves. They're all contributors to the book Decarbonizing Asia. You'll see the QR code on the screen or screens around us if you are interested in purchasing and reading a copy of the book. So I will turn it over to you to let us know who you are and what your role is.
Thank you, Morgan. Mic check. Does this work?
Does this work? This one works.
This one works too. We will share the mic. We also don't need a microphone, but we need it for the live stream, so that's why we're using it. All right, it's good to be here. Thank you, Morgan. Thank you, FCC. It's a real pleasure to be here. And thank you all for coming. My name is Tony Verb, Agustin Tony Verb. I'm from Hungary originally, but lived in Hong Kong for 11 years. And I'm probably responsible for initiating this book because I stumbled upon decarbonization as a topic that I wanted to dedicate myself to from a professional perspective 4 years ago, and did a lot of research and didn't find a book or enough publication in the topic of investment opportunities, technologies, and related trends specifically in Asia. And as I started the research and as I started to talk to people that understood more about the space, we ultimately ended up writing a book together about the topic to fill that gap in the academic and business literature. And that is what's behind that QR code that hypnotically is looking at you to buy the book. By the way, we get very little share of the proceeds, so this is not a selfish invitation. It's just an invitation to engage with the topic further and the great contributions that the people next to me and many others have contributed. So very nice to meet you all, and I will pass it to Alex next to me.
Hello, everybody. I'm Alexandra Tracy. I'm usually sitting at the table there watching the illustrious speakers, so it's very exciting and rather daunting to be sitting at this end of the room today. So I've been in Asia for my adult life, most of it in Hong Kong. I began as a project finance banker, so I built coal-fired power plants and petrochemical plants and cement plants and all sorts of what we thought were good assets all around Asia. Along the way, I've evolved a little bit, and now I have a company called Hoiping Ventures, which does research and advisory on what I call broadly green finance. So financing low carbon, mostly infrastructure in Asia, and looking at the role of governments and policymakers. So Tony very kindly invited me to write about policy and finance in the book. And I then had a fabulous opportunity actually to write a bit about food and agriculture as well, which is a very, very important sector for Asia.
Thanks, Morgan, for inviting us here. Thanks to the FCC. Hi, everybody. My name is Sandro Desideri. I'm Italian, 20 years in Hong Kong, 26 years in Asia. Been working for General Electric in the oil and gas, power generation, smart grid, and smart city business for 25 years. And after this, joining the Science Technology Park, leading the green technology cluster. And then I put up my own company on energy transition. We follow projects for decarbonization, gas to power, combined heat and power for the industry and for also utilities. So I've been very lucky to be invited by Tony to join the authoring team of the book, and I'm taking care of the two chapters. One is the industry and waste, and the other one is the more relevant, specifically energy. And thanks again for having us here.
And finally, hi everyone, James Kruger. In 2016, I bought a Tesla and drove around the streets of Hong Kong thinking I was virtuous, and like all the investment bankers in Hong Kong, thinking a lot of things that weren't necessarily connected to reality. And a friend of mine was driving and said, "Do you know this car is powered by coal, and do you know where the minerals come from the car? How dare you think you're virtuous?" And ever since that challenge, I've spent a lot of time digging into the supply chain around critical minerals. And my section of the book, it relates to transport, which is an exciting area and an area where Asia does lead the world truly, and is an effort around decarbonising, even if the grid is less green. And so I think I have a retort to my friend, but I've been thinking about that retort for 7 years, and I probably have another 7 years to go. But.
Thank you. So as you can see, we have some diverse topics that we can bring up today, kind of running the gamut of some of these decarbonizing subtopics that are in the book. Tony, do you want to briefly tell us a little bit more about what's in the book outside of what the panelists are going to be talking about?
Sure, very, very briefly. We actually took the UN's six-sector solution framework, which identifies which 6 sectors are the most important to hit the 2030 decarbonization targets, and that's basically 30 gigatons of carbon emissions reduction equivalent. And we reshuffled those sectors, added a couple more, and we ended up with 9 industries that we cover in the book across 9 sections. We bundled them in sections that are titled humans, cities, and nature, the 3 factors that are critical to decarbonization. Humans, of course, because it is all anthropogenic. It's happening because of us, and we are the ones that can do about it. And within that section, we are covering policy and finance, thanks to Alexandra, industry and waste, thanks to Sandro, and also lifestyle and consumption. And the second section is dedicated to cities, which contribute to more than 75% of the world's CO2 emissions. So if we decarbonize cities, then we have most of the work done. Within cities, we cover energy, the built environment, which is property and infrastructure, as well as transport, covered by Sandro and James, respectively. And in nature, we cover food and agriculture, forestry and oceans, and sequestration. And within each chapter, it's a very modular book to make it interesting and easy to read for anyone. We have an analysis component to give an insight into where the industry is and where it's going. We are not making judgments. We are providing a snapshot of that industry in the context of investment, technology, decarbonization, and Asia. And we go through the past, present, and future of that particular sector. And we also have a startup case study, a corporate case study, and an interview in every single chapter, an interview with a policymaker, a business leader, or an investor, very much in the spirit of multi-stakeholder representation. I will stop here. I could talk forever.
Yes, thank you for that. Yeah, I think, we could take apart each of those chapters, I think, and have an entire panel on each one. There's a lot to talk about. I'll just kick off our conversation today, though, by setting the stage. Maybe we'll start with James this time and have everyone just briefly tell us, do you think Asia is on the right track for meeting its goals in the coming years when it comes to decarbonization?
Yeah, wow. For transport, yes. And, in the book, we interview MTR, and we all enjoy the electric rail system, and the majority of rail systems in Asia are electrified. And we all know that the battery ecosystem for electric cars started in China, with Korean OEMs as well. And so they really have led the way. Elon Musk would not be where he is without Panasonic, for example, and the support that he had around that drive chain. And so Asia, in my area of interest, has really been the leader of transport decarbonisation. Perhaps by necessity in terms of the urban density and the city congestion. You know, Singapore, like London, having congestion issues and quotas on cars. But there are a number of different solutions even in the mobility space and the urban mobility space that really creates Asian cities as cities of a carbonless future.
Thanks, James. I think that this is very much the Asia century, that the decarbonization is a great opportunity, probably the biggest business opportunity as well, since probably the Industrial Revolution in UK, to have a strong movement and a strong implementation of new technologies. Asia GDP is surpassing the one of the rest of the Western countries. So Asia is very much at the center of it. They're talking about $1 trillion every year to get to the net zero. Technology, 70% of it is there. We need just convergence between governments, public, private investment, and we seem to believe that this is going to be a great opportunity really to change the way we do things here in Asia. It's going to generate huge amount of works. Somebody's calculating that it's going to creating around 14 million green jobs in Asia. And this is something that is going to change completely the level of also education and the level of lifestyle that we all have.
Okay, well, I'm going to be the glass half empty person. From the point of view of financing, no, we're not remotely on track. The amounts of capital that are needed to fund this transition are enormous. ADB says it's around $1.7 trillion a year between now and 2030, just for Asian emerging markets, and currently about half of that is what's being invested. If we look at China, which of course has got an immense focus on green development, the PBOC reckons that they need $850 million of private money every year, and they're not doing that either. But I don't want to send us into a doom loop. Obviously, there is enough money in the world. Capital markets hold professionally managed assets of about $110 trillion. And what I wrote about in the book is how capital markets are changing and the kind of actions that policymakers, governments, and financial institutions can take to really accelerate and fire up this investment in Asia.
I will just add that I'm by design and by self-positioning the guy with the glass half full attitude. So definitely we are going in the right direction, but to echo Alexandra's point, we are definitely not doing enough. But what I see there is the opportunity and not the issue. But it is an issue. We can turn it into an opportunity, and we are turning it into an opportunity.
Great, thank you guys. I'll caveat all my questions with, of course, Asia is a massive area, so we can hone in on any specifics as we go through and discuss some of these questions. But James, maybe we could start with what the challenges are when it comes to transportation. What do you think are the biggest hurdles that we're facing right now?
So capital and the grid, to Alexandra's point, transport decarbonisation, it's easy for private enterprise to do road cars because consumers buy those. But they are, the rate limiting factor for them is the infrastructure that supports them, the charging infrastructure that supports them. And that's a matter of capital. So I'd say capital and infrastructure, transport and infrastructure are always inextricably linked. And then grid management. Where I now live, Australia, there's a common fear that if everyone had an EV and they turned up in their garage at 6 p.m. and charged it, then the grid would fail. And there's technology solutions for that and consumer behaviour and incentives around when to charge that all need proper top-down thinking on grid management. So I'd say capital and grid management, grid expansion.
of course, the energy story overlaps with a lot of this. Sandro, how do you look at this with the challenges we're facing, particularly in Asia? Of course, it's affordability and accessibility in a lot of these areas.
Yeah, you're right. Actually, Asia is very much in the energy trilemma, means what you want. You want affordable energy, you want reliable energy, and you want green, decarbonized energy. And we just need to see what's happening in Europe, where they're all very much into this, okay, decarbonized energy, and with the war in Ukraine, straight away they went back to buy coal and to get back into a carbonized instead kind of energy production. So the economic balance is very, sometimes is very unpredictable, or depends on geopolitical situation. By the way, Asia is in the situation that most part of the energy, and energy is responsible for 70%, including, I mean, the industrial side and the electricity production of the CO2 or greenhouse gases emission. And Asia is in the situation in which we have countries like China that have a plan. They are going to decarbonize, they're going to be carbon neutral by 2060. They pledge about it. And we can trust what they do somehow because of most part of their economy is investing into the pillars of the decarbonization. Think about the fact that 60% of the solar panels are out of China. Think about the fact that 85% of batteries for energy storage is out of China. Wind mills components, 70% actually are out of China. So the economy of China is very much into it, as well as Japan. Also Japan, with the Minister of Economy, Trade and Infrastructure, is very much focusing on the fact that the decarbonization is going to be a fantastic business. So the countries in Asia that are lagging a little bit behind are something like Southeast Asia, where they're still trying to figure out a taxonomy, so categorization. But we believe that there is going to be an alignment, mainly driven by countries like Japan, Korea, and China, with all the different countries into providing more incentives, into looking into very much energy efficiency, into probably starting with something like carbon tax and other initiatives that will make sure that funding for decarbonization is going to be available. I agree that it's going to be a long way, that you are not yet there, that this 1 trillion or 1.7 trillion per year is not there, but I think that everybody is looking into it as a possibility to invest.
And Sandro, just to follow up on that, of course, as you said, China is leading in a lot of ways, and they've certainly changed their ideas, moving away from clean coal as part of their accepted ideas of green to progress a bit. But I mean, how much are they doing, and can the rest of Asia learn from them?
Okay, the difference between China and most part of the other countries is that they have a very long-term plan. And they were planning since quite a while about having one nuclear plant every year. They say, okay, let's slow down. Let's make one nuclear plant every 3-5 years. Let's reach the peak on 2030. And then let's get out from coal slowly. Let's move to a kind of gas-to-power generation of power. And they are doing this with the new LNG system and so on. So they have a plan, and they are building their economy around this plan. What I can see, and I would say also Japan is very much looking into it. Japan has been very much shocked about what's happened with the Fukushima tragedy, about the nuclear big problem they had. And now, because of after the Fukushima, they went into coal kind of power generation situation, because of they moved to have around 50% of the power generation for the industry to be coal. Now they're trying to get out of it. And so they're trying to impose specific restriction, and they're allowing to have biomass blending into the coal-fired power plant. Korea is following the same trajectory. So I see that there are countries, they have a plan because of they see an opportunity in an economy. Japan is talking about hydrogen economy. They want to be a green hydrogen economy. So they put up a plan that is going to have investment, government investment, involving subsidizing, I would say, incentivizing private investment as well into it. And this is a great design. Southeast Asia is not yet there somehow, and India is not yet there. So this is what is going to make the difference, even though we are talking about Asia, but Asia is made by different players with different speed into getting into it.
Of course, the financing are connecting the dots with a lot of this, and that's already come up in the conversation. So Alex, maybe we can talk a little bit more about that. Are there any particular ways that governments in Asia are trying to drive private finance into this, or are there any initiatives we can look at?
I think Sandra's absolutely right that having a long-term plan and clarity over the way forward is incredibly important, and the different countries are patchy on that. I think a lot of governments are trying to sort of hit the buttons that they see everyone else is hitting along two trajectories. Mostly, the first trajectory is around trying to limit the amount of investment that's going into these high-emitting sectors. So that's all about capital market regulation, it's about standards, it's about developing taxonomies, so what's green, what's not. It's around carbon trading, taxes, much more disclosure. You know, here in Hong Kong over the last few years, we've seen the stock exchange step up its ESG disclosure requirements of companies. We've seen the SFC bringing new rules for fund managers on ESG and climate, and that's being echoed around the region. Where I think governments can do a lot more is along the second trajectory, which is really scaling up and crowding in the private financing. Here in Hong Kong, we've got about 50 regulated banking groups, and most of them are not in the game at all. They don't lend to any of these sectors. And that's due to some very fundamental just gaps in information and market failures, a very heightened sense of how risky all of this is, which may be very much overstated. And so I think there's a real role for government to provide technical assistance, education, and better information to help develop the markets, especially in Southeast Asia, as you say.
In Hong Kong as well.
But in Hong Kong as well, because Hong Kong is a huge capital market with lots of money flowing around it, and it is not being allocated in a large part to the kind of sectors where there are enormous opportunities. And you know, there is business to be done that is not being done because of these market failures and information failures.
What does education look like then? I mean, where should it come from, and what should we be seeing in these interactions?
Well, don't get me off onto my most favorite hobby horse. I mean, of course, there's a lot of technical assistance that goes around in emerging markets in Asia. You see all of the World Bank, development banks, the UN, USAID, all of these kind of people have you know, thousands of projects and initiatives that try and fill some of the gaps. What I think is the best model, which we've seen in the West, certainly in Australia, is a special kind of financial institution that gets called a green investment bank, which is, it's a government-backed institution whose mandate is to do these two things. Number one, educate the market, and number two, help to create financial instruments that will crowd in investment. So it's not about subsidies, it's not about beating a stick, it's really about helping to provide a bit more carrot, if you like, to bring the market along, address the gaps, provide better data, and also use, where it's appropriate, judicious amounts of government capital to really bring the private sector in alongside.
And if I can add with an example, absolutely agree what Alex was saying. Let's consider a case of Hong Kong, the green bonds for the Hong Kong International Airport that has been actually put on sale for supporting an infrastructure investment that is building the third runway. Now, honestly, I don't see anything of green beside all the protest on the dolphin that is very legitimate. But honestly, this is just an infrastructure investment. What has this to do with green? If you consider how much emission you have by producing 1 ton of concrete or cement, and how much cement you're going to put to do the third runway, there's going to be, you're going to take centuries to get it back. So this is something that means very much about education, educating the market, and making sure that when somebody said you are investing in something green, means something really green, means that there is a way to measure it. There is a way to give substantial proof that the money is going to go in the right direction.
Can I just say one more thing and then I'll stop talking? The Hong Kong government has become a lot more interventionist recently, and Paul Chan has been announcing a raft of measures around green finance and green technology over the last couple of weeks. And a lot of them involve subsidies. Now, you don't need to subsidize electric taxis or electric buses. You can look at other markets. You can look at Australia, you can look at North America, and you'll see successful, tried and tested public-private financing packages that will allow you to electrify your vehicles, for example. It's exactly the same for rooftop solar. It's the same for energy efficiency. Subsidies are not really the most efficient way to do these things, but the government can play a role in setting up the right kind of platforms and the right kind of structures and understanding what the private sector actually needs.
Let me jump in with a glass half full kind of comment, and I think this relates to the book as well. That when I personally started to engage with the topic of decarbonization deeply, and as I said, it was 4 years ago, there was no country in Asia with a net zero commitment apart from Bhutan. And obviously for Bhutan it's relatively easy, still admirable, and it's in their constitution that they need to stay carbon negative, but there was no other country. And now the list is so long, I'm not going to bore you with that. But Hong Kong, China, South Korea, and Japan came out in 2020. And since then, there has been a lot of movement. And obviously, Hong Kong is now announcing the various measures in green finance and trying to become a green tech hub, which is a bit late from my perspective, but it's still happening. So in a lot of countries, we still don't see the impact of these commitments and how the market and the policy started to move, but it started to move. And quite frankly, the big takeaway of the book as well, that a lot more is happening in Asia than, quite frankly, I thought, or we collectively thought. It became a 350 pages long book versus a 250 page is that we were originally planning, because there was so much going on. So it is actually encouraging that things are happening. Not necessarily the best practices are being spread or the best practices are being implemented everywhere, but in every country we now go in Asia, decarbonization, green technologies, green finance are actually the conversation topics, and people want to do, policymakers want to do something about it, investors want to do something about it, and it is happening, thankfully.
Well, I just want to give everyone a heads up. We have about 15 minutes left in the conversation. I have plenty more questions to keep going, but please, if you have questions, do put your hand up, and we'll get a mic to you to make sure we get everyone a chance to. We've got one question, Genevieve in the front.
Thank you very much. It was great to have such a flavour of different perspectives and specialisms. So great panel, thank you. I've had experience at large with things like Formula E and, back in the day, all the commitments of London to make transport all electric by 2040. A brother in Shanghai who's always on the pulse of what the technology is doing over there. But I go back to the point of Hong Kong and the positioning of Asia's sort of world city, which is still our title. And I'm wondering, when I look at the description of that talks about how we are, our strengths lie in financial services, trade, tourism, communications, and a regional hub for business. And I think, really, is that as far as it goes? And I guess my question is, if we want to retain, or rather rejuvenate ourselves as Asia's world, I add the word class, because that means best practice, world-class city of Asia, shouldn't we be actually amplifying and investing more in that? And for me, it becomes a training at a training level. So what do you feel we're doing or can do more of to our talent, our young generation who are designing these projects, who are visualizing what the future building of of the skyscraper is. How can we do it at the grassroots of our young talent? Because I feel we're kind of coming in at it when it's been done, or rather demolished. So how can we help bring in more education, more excitement around the young owning, let's do this better, and then obviously that would help our sort of green tick in terms of what we're doing as a city. Sorry, that was a long-winded question, but I'm hoping you get the essence. Thank you.
This is my hobby horse, of course, as everyone knows. So
You thought the question was long. Wait till you see.
No. I will deliberately cut it short, and we can organize a coffee meeting just to, vent and rant. But I think there has been, and a lot of people on, like all of us on this panel, have been having various conversations with people that had something to do with various aspects of what you just touched upon many years ago, for many years, how Hong Kong actually could be that world-class city and leading the region in everything green, but most importantly, green finance, green tech, and that ship hasn't sailed, but there was a very big moment and opportunity a couple of years ago to direct resources towards that. Now it's almost a necessity, and we are kind of playing catch up. So can we lead? I'm not sure. Can we lead based on the trajectory that we've been on and the case studies we've seen over the past couple of years in executing various plans? I'm not sure, but we need to do it. So there's no answer to how, because everything you mentioned on the education side of things is very important, but ultimately there has to be a top-down, very strong vision and leadership in this space, and the city needs rejuvenation, needs reinvestment and investments with a different mindset, and that is the only mindset. Now, I would like to see, strong statements of action on this front versus just headlines of becoming a green tech and finance hub and organizing a green tech and finance week at the end of the year, which can be catalytic, but an event will tick a box but won't do anything for the city. So, and I could go on and on and on and on. Sorry, I didn't answer your question, but you gave me some space to vent. Thank you.
If I can say something on this subject, Hong Kong is a very special place. It's very rich of potential talents, but there is the lack, and this is relevant to my sector, energy infrastructure. There is the lack sometimes of the possibility to pilot new technologies. That means that if you have China Lighting Power, Hong Kong Electric, Town Gas, and you have all the other government waste management, water treatment, and so on, that are quite resilient to innovation, you will not bring talents here if they cannot see piloting what is the innovation. And I experienced this when I was in Science Park. A lot of guys coming out with fantastic ideas. One guy invented a way to get to the energy out of tide and waves. But you cannot have this piloted in Hong Kong for many reasons, many. And you cannot have this kind of source of energy to be connected with CLP, because our CLP has a contract. And as you know, it's only the only company that can get energy and distribute energy. So I think that maybe if Hong Kong is going to open a little bit to piloting and is going to actually attract talents that wants to pilot, you're going to have much more rejuvenation of talents as well. And not people working just on apps and e-commerce, but on something real. Sorry. My very Italian way.
Great. Yes, we have another question. Yes.
Thanks. Hong Kong imports the vast majority of its food, manufactured goods, and all its energy, basically, and it pays for that by providing services. The biggest contributor to that, I believe, these days is financial services. So be kind to investment bankers. Our economy would not be good without them. And on that score, there's a danger that we miss out on the future. The future, I think, relates to these just energy transition partnerships. There was one in South Africa a year ago. There's one that was announced at the time of the last COP for Indonesia, $20 billion. And what these involve is the governments putting in political will and a small amount of capital to make it possible for investment bankers to provide a large amount of capital on a for-profit basis. And do we have a seat at that table at the moment? I'm not aware of Hong Kong really being involved. And I fear that means that somebody else is going to eat our dinner, which means we won't be able to buy our dinner. Thank you.
Well, you just made my lobbying point for me. Been having that conversation for years and years and years, that there is an immense opportunity for Hong Kong. And you mentioned, Genevieve, you mentioned the word being a regional centre. I think there are two perhaps slight missteps, you can understand why, but that Hong Kong has made. One is, I think, to put all of our eggs in the China basket. When I came here as an investment banker, we were a regional centre, and I didn't do China business at all. We did India out of here, we did Australia, we did ASEAN, and I think it's a shame that we've given away so much of that business, although obviously there were tremendous opportunities in China. I mean, the second point, I think, comes back to what Sandra said at the beginning, which is about having a long-term plan. I don't think that is the strength of the Hong Kong government at the moment. Again, you can understand why. Hong Kong was run by civil servants for decades. But you see them sort of leaping on the bandwagon and catching the next fad. So right now, green finance is sort of yesterday's news because it's all about crypto. And that's a problem. You know, you need to have a long-term vision to be going in the right direction. But yes, absolutely, Hong Kong is a very strong financial centre. We have very reputable capital markets. We do still have the rule of law. We have compliance. We have disclosure. We have transparency. This is the kind of place that finances should be able to trust that they will be able to do business successfully. And we also have huge capital resources here in the government, which could be used to fund some of these sectors where the technology is fairly mature, the information flows are good, the track records are good, the supply chains are better than they used to be. It just needs a bit of a nudge of encouragement to really mobilize that capital at scale. And you see, again, my hobby horse is green investment banks, but you see green investment banks being developed all over Asia. In Thailand, in Mongolia they have one, in Indonesia, in the Philippines. Where would you choose to make your investments? Kazakhstan? Would you rather invest through Hong Kong, with everything that we have here, or would you rather do it through Kazakhstan? I don't want to be offensive to Kazakhstan, but I think most investment bankers would choose Hong Kong.
If I could ask a follow-up question, what does the Hong Kong government need to do for us to have a seat at the table with just energy transition partnerships?
Well, I just can't even envisage a situation where the Hong Kong government could understand what you're talking about right now. Sorry, you answered. You response that I do.
Yeah. Okay. I was going to say, does anyone else want to jump in on that before we go to our next question? James, you look like you have something.
I do, but it's a rabbit hole. So I'll talk to you.
Okay, well, we'll take that offline afterwards.
But was an excellent question.
Yeah,
It is.
Absolutely.
Yes, there's a question back there.
So, third-party independent verification of these projects and sanity checking. How comfortable are you guys with the veracity of those systems? I've been, as an investor, I've been to, I'm sure we all have, enough factories and steel mills and things like that around the region on day one, where we surreptitiously return on day 3, and there's tumbleweeds blowing through. Or, as is my case, driving by a clear-cut section of land and asking, well, what's going up there? And then being told, oh, it's being prepared for a carbon replacement reforestation project. You know, just basic sanity checking of things like that. Where are we, and how comfortable are you guys with those sort of systems?
Great. Yes, Sandra, you want to start?
Yeah, so I think your point is about the certification and measuring of the effectiveness of the implementation of a decarbonization strategy. Now, there are plenty of entities, starting from the United Nations, that have a fantastic platform, the UNFCCC, sorry, let me not spell the full acronym, but is one of the most important in trying to set standards. There are plenty of organisms trying to settle this. There are actually the BSI, the British Standard Institute, they come out with a PAD 2060 that is a kind of a format in which you can actually certify the impact in terms of decarbonization. There are companies, big companies, Bureau Veritas, TÜV, Germany. They are actually investing huge amount of money in being able to be certified as the best way to measure the impact of a decarbonization strategy. So all things are moving now, moving parts. Of course, you need to put all these parties together and trying to have a world unified system. We are a little bit far away, but there is a need around this. There are actually a very important thing is about carbon credits. Carbon credits is actually something that on the voluntary side, there are companies like Vera. Vera is able to provide the carbon credit certification and is able then, with company like Bureau Veritas, to measure and to provide a specific impact. So you know exactly how much you're going to get in terms of CO2 equivalent saving out of the strategy or the implementation that you've done. So there are these entities. I think that we all need to be aware about it, and I think that we need to work on making sure the governments and everybody is able to provide a full support to the implementation of a unified standard. Sorry, is mission impossible? No, it will take some time because of, if I see the history, and sorry, let me spend a lot in the oil and gas, before we get into a unified standard for oil and gas. And think about oil and gas, you have oil everywhere, you have gas everywhere, you have gasoline everywhere. Why? Because of, then somebody accepted that the API standard were the standard to follow. But because of Americans were the leading country, Americans were then investing into it. Maybe you're going to have China standard because China is going to be the first one to invest full money into it. I don't know. But it's an open ground of, I would say, battle, positive battle.
Can I add a quick word on that? I think that, I mean, technology is obviously evolving rapidly and is supporting these efforts. And so, you know, you have satellite imagery that allows you to look at whether there are trees there or not. There are a lot of financial reporting platforms now that are using technology that are allowing you to monitor your portfolio companies and look at their emissions and look at their supply chain in a much more efficient way. One of our colleagues who's not here today, I wrote about it in the book. He had a startup company in Hong Kong, which is called All Infra, and they use a blockchain platform to basically to provide real-time emissions and energy usage information, and that's absolutely critical to underpin the credibility of a green financial instrument like a green bond, for example, or as Sandra was talking about, trading of carbon credits or renewable energy certificates.
And that's a sign on things that are happening in Asia, in Hong Kong actually, and that space is evolving. We are coming from a pretty lax and loose environment, but evolving, thankfully, like the entire ecosystem. And just to give a bit of slack to Hong Kong, I said it's too late. It's not too late. It's happening, and I don't have the answer how Hong Kong can get a seat at the table where it should have a seat. But I see that there is now awareness and desire to actually progress towards that reality. So I unfortunately can't advise anyone how to get there, but I at least see the consciousness and the desire, and hopefully that will result in the kind of action that we need. I always have hope, and definitely hope and love and support for this city. So whatever way I can help, I will try, and we will try, I'm sure, because we are all committed and very much supportive to the ecosystem, and if the government is part of the ecosystem, so I'm very happy to talk to everyone.
It's a very positive note for us to end on. Yes. Yes, marketing for Hong Kong right there.
But you will see that the carbon credit market opening in Hong Kong is going to bring great things, I'm sure. Very good things. So,
I really hate to end this conversation as I feel like we've just barely started to scrape the surface of this. But unfortunately, our panelists do need to get off. They have a busy schedule ahead of them. Thank you all very much for joining us today. Hopefully we can continue this conversation offline. I'm sure everyone is happy to share their contact information and cards. Hopefully we'll have more of these type of discussions at the FCC. Of course, let us know on the board if there's anything that you're eager to hear about, any topics, any additional books that we can bring in. Thank you so much to our panelists. It's been a pleasure having you guys. We have little FCC goodie bags for you, so thank you for being our guests today. And I welcome you all to come back anytime.
Thank you very
Thank you.
much. Thank you.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you, guys.
Thank you.